The automotive world is filled with tons of different awards and certifications and all this stuff, and every manufacturer wants these awards. They want to, advertise and say, hey, look at us, look at our cars. We have these awards from this company, which makes us clearly better than the other guys. But at the end of the day, a lot of these awards are honestly totally useless. They mean very little, they're very subjective, and there's no guarantee that these aren't just being bought or paid for or bribed. But there is one award that I wanted to look at, and that's the International Engine of the Year Award. Now, this award has been going on since 1999, and it's been on hiatus since 2019, due to COVID, but it should be coming back fairly soon. Presumably they put it on hiatus because a lot of the judges on the panel are kind of old, and putting them all together in one building might not be the best idea, but that's besides the point. Let's take a look at every single engine that has won this award from 1999 all the way up until 2019 when the award last stopped. Before we can get into each engine that won every single year, I want to quickly cover where this award came from, who put it together, who the judges are, and why it exists. And it all starts with UKI Media and Events. That's the UK-based company that puts this whole thing together, and it was founded and run by a gentleman named Tony Robinson. The award is given to each engine based on the decision of a panel of 70 judges. There are categories for each engine, and they rank them accordingly. In every category, the judges each shortlist engines using their subjective driving impressions and technical knowledge, taking into account characteristics such as fuel economy, smoothness, performance, power delivery, noise, and overall drivability. With that in mind, I want to note that this award is highly subjective and strictly based on brand new engines in brand new cars. None of these judges are judging the engines based on how easy they are to work on, or how reliable they are over the next 10 years, or the aftermarket performance, or the tuning, or anything like that. Just keep all that in mind as we go through this. It is a flawed award, and although there's a nice big panel of 70 judges with an average experience of 28 years in automotive journalism, it's still subjective at the end of the day, as is pretty much every automotive award. If we look at this from oldest to newest, let's start in 1999, where we have the very first award winner. Can we get a drum roll? It's the Toyota 1SZ FE in the Toyota Yaris. Pretty underwhelming. This engine was actually jointly developed by Toyota and Daihatsu. The SZ engine family as a whole is a family of small four-cylinder engines produced for small cars, including the Yaris, Echo, and Vitz. Other SZ engines, such as the 2SZ and the 3SZ, are also used in tons of Daihatsu applications. The 1SZ is a 1-liter cast iron block engine with 4 valves per cylinder, driven by dual overhead cams. A bore and stroke of 69mm by 66.7mm, a compression ratio of 10:1, and a massive power output of 69 horsepower and 70 pound-feet of torque. It also features Toyota's VVTi system and an offset crankshaft. Realistically, this engine is really boring. There's genuinely nothing special about it at all. It's tiny, barely makes any power, has literally no advanced features, and it just does its job. So let's move on, because I don't understand why this one won the award in 1999. So moving on to the year 2000, we have yet another 1-liter engine, but this time it's from Honda. This engine is the ECA-1, which is the engine used in the very first generation Honda Insight. I know what you're thinking, is this whole list just going to be a bunch of stupid little engines? And the answer is no, because the next engine is actually one of the most known performance engines ever, but we'll get to that shortly. While the Honda Insight itself is extremely boring, the ECA-1 was actually really advanced at the time that it came out. This engine is a tiny 3-cylinder 1-liter engine with a single overhead cam 12-valve head. Paired with that engine is a 10 kilowatt electric motor, which provides an extra 13 horsepower and 36 pound-feet of torque. It's rated at a whopping 67 horsepower, which is ironically almost as bad as the Toyota engine that won the award the year prior. Because Honda's engineers had such a big focus on keeping this engine and the entire platform lightweight, the engine is constructed from aluminum, magnesium, and plastic. The electric engine is part of Honda's integrated motor assist hybrid technology. It's a very thin brushless motor that's mounted on the crank. When combined with the 1-liter gas engine, output is 73 horsepower and 91 pound-feet of torque. I could be wrong, but I'd have to suspect a lot of why this engine won in 2000 was because of its insane fuel economy at 61 miles per gallon, and the fact that it was a hybrid drivetrain, which wasn't something that you'd normally see back then. Okay, so moving on from these boring little engines, let's look at the year 2001 and the award winner then, which is the BMW S54 Found in the M3. In 2001, the M3 was on a tear. It produced a ton of power, looked absolutely amazing, and absolutely dominated the competition. This is a little off topic, but I think the E46 M3 is still one of BMW's best looking cars ever, and the design hasn't dated at all. They could release the E46 M3 this year with a few minor tweaks and you'd have no idea that it was released 2 decades ago. Anyways, the S54 under the hood is actually just an evolution of the M54. Unlike the M54 though, the S54 uses a heavy cast iron block, which is actually based on the block of the S50 in the E36. Realistically, the S54 is almost more of an evolution of the S50 rather than the M54, but that's a topic for another day. It features a bore and stroke of 87mm by 91mm, bringing total displacement up to 3.2 liters, which was up from the S50, which was only a 3 liter. It also features a forged and nitrated crankshaft with 12 counterweights, forged connecting rods, and high compression forged pistons. All of this was designed to help the rotating assembly handle the stress of high RPM usage, with a red line of around 8,000 RPM. The aluminum 24 valve cylinder head got a pretty major redesign compared to the S50's head. Not only is the S54 head lighter, but it includes an improved continuously variable valve timing double Vano system, new hollow camshafts, and finger followers instead of the old bucket style lifters. One of the more notable features are the individual throttle bodies on the intake, which offer a ton of performance. All that fancy stuff equals out to 338 horsepower and 269 pound-feet of torque. Unfortunately, the variant that we had here in the US had a few small changes to help with emissions compliance, so ours produces a little bit less at 333 horsepower and 262 pound-feet of torque. It's easy to understand why this engine won in 2001. It sounds amazing, has a great power curve, produces a ton of power considering it's naturally aspirated, and it was packaged into a great car. Of course, the car isn't supposed to affect the rating of the engine, but I highly doubt all 70 judges were impartial to the fact that the E46 M3 wasn't an amazing car and chassis when it was new. Moving on to 2002, we have yet another BMW engine as the winner. This time around, it wasn't one of BMW's beloved inline-6 engines, it was actually one of their V8 engines. More specifically, it was the 4.4-liter N62. Right off the bat, I have to imagine 2 things helped this engine win in 2002. One, it was the first engine in the world to use a continuously variable length intake manifold system, and 2, it was BMW's first V8 engine to feature variable valve lift. Of all the N62 engines, the specific version we're looking at is the N62 B44, with that 44 at the end of the name for the 4.4 liters of displacement of the engine. You could find this engine in the 745i, X5, 545i, and 645ci. It was in production from 2001 up to 2007. In terms of some basic specs, we're looking at a bore and stroke of 92mm by 82.7mm, which makes this engine pretty over square. This isn't something you typically see as often anymore in the automotive world, since you'll generally end up with more favorable results by using fairly even bore and stroke. The block is cast aluminum, as are the cylinder heads, and in the heads you'll find dual overhead cams with 4 valves per cylinder. Power is rated at 329 horsepower and 330 pound-feet, which is surprisingly even considering the bore and stroke. Okay, moving on to 2003, we have a big change of pace with the winner having 0 pistons at all. More specifically, the 2003 winner was actually a rotary, the Mazda 1.3 liter found in the RX-8. Even more specifically than that, the 13B MSP Renesis, which is the multi-side port engine, is the one that won. Now, this is an evolution of the 13B rotary with an emphasis on reducing emissions output and improving fuel economy, both of which were pretty trash on the 13B. Compared to previous rotary engines, the Renesis had a few major changes. Most notably, the exhaust ports are not peripheral. Instead, they are located on the side of the housing of the engine. Mazda did this for an increase in power, since it effectively increases the compression ratio, but it also helps eliminate overlap. They also improved how the rotors are sealed with redesigned and improved seals, most notably a change to the apex seals. Along with that came improved power and engine longevity. I'm sure if you've looked around online, you've seen plenty of people talking about the apex seal failure. And while it is a big point of contention on the rotary engine, it's an area that Mazda improved, or at least tried to improve, with the Renesis engine. Alright, so that takes us up to 2004, where we're unfortunately back to a boring winner for this award, so I'll try to get through this section pretty quickly. This is the 1NZ FXE from Toyota, which is the 1.5 liter hybrid drivetrain found on the Toyota Prius. Features a bore and stroke of 75mm by 84.7mm, which is actually pretty interesting, but it makes sense in this context because there are fuel efficiency benefits to using a longer stroke, which we've covered in another video that I'll leave linked in the description. It also features a very high 13:1 compression ratio, but because it uses an Atkinson cycle, the effective compression ratio is actually lower at around 9.5:1. To put that really simply, the Atkinson cycle provides a more efficient compression to expansion ratio, which just means better fuel efficiency. Combined with the engine is Toyota's hybrid synergy drive, which bumps the combined power output to 109 horsepower and 104 pound-feet of torque. Other things quickly worth noting is that this is an all-aluminum engine and features forged steel connecting rods. Toyota dropped this engine in 2009 in favor of the 2ZR FXE. Okay, moving on from the Prius because it's disgusting and boring, the next winner is yet another BMW engine. From 2005 to 2006, the BMW S58 B50 was the winner of the award, making it the first engine to win the award back-to-back years. In my opinion, this is one of the most interesting engines on this list, especially considering naturally aspirated V10s are on their way out in favor of smaller turbocharged engines. Lamborghini is really the only automaker left using the V10 design with their Huracan, but that'll also end in the near future. The S85 B50 is the engine that you'll find in the M5 and M6. It's a 5-liter V10 that screams to nearly 8,000 RPM and produces a whopping 500 horsepower and 384 pound-feet of torque. It has a bore and stroke of 92 millimeters by 75.2 millimeters, which makes it insanely over square, which is one of the characteristics that gives it the ability to rev so high. With a short stroke comes less piston acceleration, and then it's just much easier to rev high without things exploding. As you'd expect for such an insane modern performance engine, it also uses dual overhead cams, 4 valves per cylinder, dual vanos, and all aluminum construction, individual throttle bodies, and a very high 12:1 compression ratio. This is one of the few engines on this list that actually probably truly deserved this award. The S85 sounds amazing, it's incredibly smooth, it has a ton of power, and it's actually not as bad on fuel efficiency as you might think. That brings us to 2007, where we have yet another BMW engine winning the award. This time around though, it was the N54, which was BMW's first turbocharged engine, which has since been dubbed as the modern 2JZ, and it's been a legendary engine and all this stuff. At the time though, they didn't know all that stuff. At that time, it was just a good turbocharged inline-6 engine. Up until 2006, BMW was mostly focused on naturally aspirated engines. Cars like the M3 were known and loved for their high-revving naturally aspirated engines, which made you work hard for the power. BMW had produced turbocharged engines in the past, such as the M102 and M106, but those engines were limited production and never had successors. Therefore, they were not mass-produced engines. The N54 was BMW's first mass-produced turbocharged engine, and they debuted it at the 2006 Geneva Motor Show and launched it in the 335i. The N54 is part of the NG6 BMW engine family. It was developed alongside the N53. It uses an aluminum block and aluminum head, just like other engines in the NG6 engine family. The idea behind the N54 was to produce an engine which was super smooth, offered significantly more torque than previous BMW 6-cylinder engines, and virtually no turbo lag. BMW minimized the turbo lag by using 2 smaller turbos running in parallel, which they dubbed twin power turbo. BMW rated the N54 at 300 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque. However, it's widely accepted that that power figure is very underrated. Moving on from the N54, the next engine to win the award actually comes from Volkswagen in the form of their 1.4-liter TSI twin charger engine. What makes this engine particularly interesting, and probably the reason it won the award in 2009 and 2010, is the fact that it uses a turbocharger and supercharger. In most road-going applications, you'll see a turbocharger, and very rarely will you see a supercharger used unless it's an American car with a V8. So seeing both types of forced induction packaged nicely onto a little 1.4 4-cylinder engine is really cool. It produced a very impressive 178 horsepower and 177 pound-feet of torque at just 1500 RPM. You heard that right, peak torque at just 1500 RPM. It's pretty insane. It's a masterstroke of downsizing technology and a real engineering showcase. I have no doubt that this engine will become the template for a whole new generation of high-efficiency, small-capacity engines in the years to come, said Dean Slavnich, co-chairman of the awards during this time. Unfortunately, the twin charger idea didn't last particularly long, as Volkswagen realized it was way too expensive to produce. At that time, it was just the third engine to win the award back-to-back. But that takes us to 2011, where another really tiny engine snuck away with the award, and that's the Fiat Twin Air engine. This is a tiny little 2-cylinder engine with variable valve timing, variable valve lift, and a turbo strap to it. In terms of bore and stroke, it's at 80.5 millimeter and 80.6 millimeters respectively, which brings total displacement up to 875 cc's. The block is cast iron and the head is aluminum, and the head features 4 valves per cylinder and a single overhead cam design. Strangely enough, the compression is fairly high for a turbocharged engine without direct injection at 10:1. All of this equals out to a whopping 103 horsepower and 107 pound-feet of torque, which is actually pretty good considering how small the engine is. Of course, with such a small engine comes pretty good fuel economy, with some reports claiming the Fiat 500 Twin Air seeing upwards of 68 miles to the gallon. Combine that with the fact that some journalists really like the way this engine sounds, and you can see how it snuck away with the award this year. Moving to 2012, we have yet another small engine that took home the award, but this time it was Ford with their 1-liter EcoBoost 3-cylinder engine. In fact, this engine was the first engine to ever go back to back to back, winning the award in 2012, 2013, and 2014. This engine was used exclusively to power Ford's subcompact cars, and it really probably took home the award for its drivability. Like the twin charger engine from Volkswagen, this little engine produces a ton of torque, and it makes it very low in the rev range. More specifically, we're talking about 125 horsepower and up to 200 pound-feet of torque, with that torque peaking out at just 1400 RPM. The basic specs for this engine are as follows: 71.9 millimeter bore, 82 millimeter stroke, 10:1 compression ratio, a cast iron block, aluminum cylinder head, dual overhead cams, and variable camshaft timing. Moving on from the sub 1 liter engines, let's move to 2015, where BMW yet again took home this award. This time though, their winner wasn't a V8 or V10 or one of their beloved inline-six engines. This time it was a really small hybrid engine. More specifically, the BMW B38 is how they took home this award. The B38 actually has a few different versions, but the one that specifically won the award is the 1.5 liter version found in the BMW i8, which is the B38 K15T0. This little turbocharged 3-cylinder engine is paired with a hybrid drivetrain, which bumps the fuel economy numbers up to around 29 miles per gallon, which isn't particularly great, but you have to also remember that this is a hybrid performance application. The turbocharger comes from Continental, and it's a single scroll unit with the world's first aluminum turbine housing. Now you might be wondering why it doesn't use a twin scroll like you'll see on other modern performance engines, and that's because there's really no benefit to using a twin scroll on an engine that has only one bank of cylinders. What I mean by that is because this engine is a 3-cylinder, there's really only one bank, and twin scrolls only work when there's 2 banks of cylinders. So you would have one bank of cylinders powering one scroll of the turbocharger and another bank powering the other scroll of the turbocharger. Since this is an inline 3, it really makes no sense, so they use that single scroll design turbo. Other quick things to note are the 82 millimeter bore, 94.6 millimeter stroke, dual overhead cams, dual vanos, and an 11:1 compression ratio and direct injection. That brings us up to 2016 with the most current winner of this award, which actually comes from Ferrari. It's the Ferrari F154 3.9 liter V8, which if you didn't know, that's the engine that they use in the 488 as well as a bunch of other cars, but the version in the 488 is specifically the version that won this award. And I mentioned at the start of the video that this award stopped running in 2019 due to COVID, which means that this Ferrari engine won it in 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019. It's the only engine to win this award 4 times in a row. Now, the application isn't supposed to affect the rating of the engine, but there's no way that you can tell me that if this engine was in something that wasn't a supercar, let's just take a Kia Stinger for example, that it would be praised as much. A huge part of the drivability for this engine is Ferrari's amazing transmission. But that brings me to my next point, which is that the F154 engine family is used in Maserati and Alfa Romeo applications. So why is that the Ferrari application specifically won the award? This engine uses a 90-degree V-angle, an aluminum block, and aluminum heads, dual overhead cams, and 2 twin-scroll turbochargers. It also uses direct injection and variable valve timing on both the intake and exhaust side. The Ferrari version of this engine has a flat-plane crankshaft and dry sump lubrication, which is a must-have item for engines that'll go through hard track use. Bore and stroke measure at 86.5 by 83 millimeters. All in, the F154 is a great engine and produces a whopping 710 horsepower and 568 pound-feet of torque in this exact configuration that won the award. But there are less powerful and more powerful versions of this engine that are used in other applications from Maserati and Alfa, as well as Ferrari. By far, this is the most powerful engine on this list. If you ask me, this is one of the few engines on this list that is actually deserving of this award, and that's solely for the fact of how much power it makes, how well it's packaged, and how surprisingly reliable it is. At the end of the day, it's still a Ferrari. It's still gonna blow up all the time, but it's significantly better than previous Ferrari engines. So that's that. That is every single engine that has won the International Engine of the Year award. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, it's a very highly subjective award, and I think it's highly flawed, with very few of those engines actually deserving that award. The N54 makes sense, the Ferrari engine makes sense. Outside of that though, a lot of these are really subjective, and you have to remember that none of these journalists that are ranking these engines, there's 70 of these judges, not all of them are working on these engines, not all of them even work on their own cars, so just keep that in mind. It's really subjective, it's based on new cars, and those people driving those new cars. They're not tearing apart the engines, they're not working on these, so just keep that in mind. I wanna know what you guys think though. Let me know down in the comments below. What did you think of this video? What engines do you think deserved this award? What engines do you think didn't deserve this award? Let me know down there. While you're down there, get subscribed so you don't miss out on future videos. Smash the thumbs up button because it really helps me out, helps grow the channel. Get subscribed so you don't miss out on future videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one.